Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. The first item of business is general questions, and at question number 1 I call Neil Bibby.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what funding it will provide to support the work of the Inverclyde Task Force, including in relation to investment in facilities at Ferguson Marine.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Ministers participate in the work of the Inverclyde Task Force to examine new ways of enabling a successful and sustainable wellbeing economy to thrive in the area. The Task Force joint chairs submitted a letter to the Minister for Small Business, Trade and Innovation, setting out a number of investment proposals. These proposals will be given detailed consideration by the Scottish Government. Separately, a formal request for capital investment has been made by Ferguson Marine Port Glasgow, which is currently undergoing due diligence. Once concluded, ministers will update Parliament should further investment in Ferguson Marine be agreed.
Neil Bibby.
I thank the Minister for that answer. The GMB trade union, supported by parties across this chamber, have made the Government aware of an impending deadline for placing a new plating line order at Ferguson's. Workers and management are clear this investment is essential to improving efficiencies and securing a future for the yard. Failure to do this urgently will result in many more months of delay. The Inverclyde Task Force was established because the former Finance Secretary believed it could make the case for levering in funding to Inverclyde. Recent job losses make that need even greater. So will the Government commit today to investing in facilities at Ferguson's and additional cash to kick-start Inverclyde's economy? And if it won't today, when will a decision be made?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Neil Bibby for that question and his interest in this area. I'm due to meet with union officials later this afternoon, actually, with Stuart McMillan, who has them in Parliament today, to discuss some of these issues as well as others. He'll be aware, obviously, of the state aid and subsidy control issues that are at play with regards to this request, but we continue to scrutinise that and look to do everything that we can to make sure that the yard is supported within the powers and resources that we have, that we're able to continue that support, and will continue to engage, as you'd expect, both with the management and with the trade unions to continue that engagement work.
Stuart McMillan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As co-chair of the Inverclyde Task Force, I want to be clear that the recent funding asks from the Task Force and the funding ask from the cross-party group of politicians regarding Ferguson Marine are two separate matters. That said, the Task Force has outlined several ambitious projects in Inverclyde, and also regarding the issue regarding the Ferguson Marine and the investment. This investment would be extremely urgent and also important. I would ask the Cabinet Secretary to update the Chamber at the quickest possible time after the due diligence is completed.
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Stuart McMillan, not just for his consistent and diligent work for his constituents, both in terms of the task force, but also with Ferguson Marine, but also for his question there. And I can give him that undertaking that we will consider this as quickly as possible in terms of Ferguson Marine, and update him and other colleagues as quickly as we can once that due diligence process has been completed. Separately, regarding the task force, as was confirmed by the Minister for Small Business, Trade and Innovation in his reply to the letter from Stuart McMillan and the leader of Inverclyde Council, the Scottish Government will scrutinise the proposals assembled by the task force, and we will also continue to participate in the work of the task force, offering feedback on the proposals and work with UK Government colleagues who are also involved and have an interested stake.
Jamie Green.
Thank you. Inverclyde Task Force has a wider remit to ensure that the region makes best use of all its maritime assets for improved economic prosperity. To that end, can I ask if the Cabinet Secretary is aware of local campaigners who believe that its port facilities, including Inchgreen Dry Dock, are being vastly underutilised, and would he be willing to come to Greenock and meet with those campaigners?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Jamie Green for that question. I'd be more than happy to engage with the work that he speaks of to make sure that we're able to see maximum benefit of the infrastructure that we have in place, both in Inverclyde, but the port infrastructure that we have there in Inverclyde around Greenock, but also across Scotland, to make sure that the work that I believe we will be able to enjoy going forward can be enjoyed by as many communities as possible.
Question number 2, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on whether the regeneration plans for Glasgow's Golden Z will deliver the jobs and opportunities needed to grow the city economy.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. The Scottish Government supports Glasgow City Council's Golden Z regeneration plans, as they align fully with our commitment in the programme for government to drive regional economic growth and empowerment. The programme for government also acknowledges Glasgow's pivotal role as a key economic driver in the region and for the rest of Scotland, and these plans will be crucial in fostering growth, generating employment opportunities and enhancing prospects, not only for Glasgow but for the wider region as well.
Pauline McNeill.
I too welcome the investments secured to put Glasgow back on the map, as I hope the number 2 in the UK list of retail centres, which it has enjoyed for the last 2 decades. But we are already losing shoppers due to the current state of Glasgow city centre. There's also significant concerns about parts of Sauchiehall Street giving cause for concern since the ABC went down in the fire, Glasgow School of Art fire. So will the Scottish Government support my call for a robust economic impact assessment to ensure that there's a viable plan for the Golden Z with a delivery team in place, because without delivery then we won't see the result we want?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Pauline McNeill for that question and the work that she's doing to engage with Glasgow City Council, the work that they are doing, and recognising the importance of getting this right, of making sure that we have an offering in Glasgow City Centre that is relevant to what people are looking for city centre locations. I understand that the Golden Z regeneration plans are already based on extensive research and economic analysis, and whilst all investment involves an element of risk, I'm sure that once implemented, the plans will have a significant impact on the ability of the city to attract and retain jobs. I'm more than happy to furnish her with more details in collaboration with colleagues in Glasgow City Council to make sure that we can realise the potential that is there.
Annie Wells.
Thank you, President Officer. Many shops and restaurants have been forced to close in Glasgow City Centre in recent years. The British Retail Consortium recently found that footfall in Glasgow was down more than it was in 10 other large UK cities. Another report revealed that footfall was 19% lower than it was pre-COVID. Does the Minister recognise that the SNP Council's low emission zone may be forcing people away from Glasgow City Centre?
Cabinet Secretary.
No, I don't. I think that the member actually helps to make the case for the need for this regeneration work. But I would also point her to the very clear evidence of businesses that I've been engaging with and those that return business surveys around the areas of key concern for them. They are energy costs, the impact of Brexit on labour market issues and the cost of living crisis, the inflationary impact of interest rate rises, which are having an impossible impact on their trading environment. So I would encourage the member to ensure that she is directing her focus on the UK Government to ensure those questions are being answered.
Question number 3, Clare Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of Gas Safety Week, which takes place this week, what engagement it has had with community safety organisations regarding action to improve gas safety awareness.
Minister Siobhan Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We provide Scottish Government grant funding and work with our partner ROSPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, which has supported and promoted Gas Safety Week for many years. ROSPA is very active in the promotion of gas and carbon monoxide safety and represent the Scottish Government's interest in the stakeholder forum of the All-Party Parliamentary Carbon Monoxide Group. ROSPA work with Gas Distribution Network to develop a web hub on carbon monoxide and have just launched 2 surveys to assess people's awareness for the prevention of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Clare Adamson.
Can I thank the Minister for her answer? We know unchecked gas appliances run a risk of carbon monoxide poisoning or explosion, and it is therefore crucial to get appliances checked regularly by Gas Safe registered engineers. Can I ask the Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking to encourage people to arrange their annual gas safety check, and what help might be available to those who find themselves in fuel poverty and unable to do this?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officers. Duties relating to maintenance of appliances applicable to landlords are set out in UK legislation. Through our partners ROSPA, we have promoted via social media and newsletters the Gas Safe Register's advice to 1. Check your gas appliances every year, and 2. Check your engineer is Gas Safe registered. Going forward, ROSPA are developing 2 surveys. One is aimed at private landlords and the other at the general public to assess their awareness of carbon monoxide poisoning and what they do to prevent it. The web hub will be developed to address the shortfalls of information covering safety and responsibility.
Thank you. Question number 4, Michael Marra.
To ask the Scottish Government when it agreed the investment zone selection method with the UK Government.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, President Officer. Scottish and UK Government officials developed a joint approach to place selection over the period from April to June, with regular updates provided to ministers throughout this period. Scottish and UK ministers formally confirmed their agreement to the approach and selected the 2 regions on the 22nd of June, and a formal note on the selection method was published on the 18th of August to fulfil the commitment made to Dundee City Council leader John Alexander.
Michael Marra.
I'm afraid the Cabinet Secretary needs to get the story straight. On the 18th of July, he told me in an answer to a written question the invitation to host an investment zone was not subject to a bidding or application process. Then, as he says, on the 18th of August, a document titled Investment Zones in Scotland Policy Model and Place Selection Methodology appeared on the UK Government's website. But the decision to award those investment zones to Glasgow and Aberdeen featured on page 1 of the document. So does he agree with his ministerial colleague Tom Arthur, who told the Finance Committee that having transparency on the application process is very important indeed, in my view, given that Dundee has now neither a green freeport or an investment zone, and this is nothing more than a political fix?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm sure Michael Marra has no interest, given one of the investment zones chosen was in his region, to pit community against community, as he appeared to try to do in answer to that question. Of course, the Scottish and UK governments have committed, again in response to a request from John Alexander, to engage on what further help might be available for Dundee and the Tay City region to ensure that we're taking full advantage of the economic opportunities, the undoubted economic opportunities that arise from those communities. I'm committed to engaging with that, and I believe UK Government colleagues are as well.
Question number 5, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking in response to the recommendation by the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child to develop statutory guidance on the use of restraint on children to ensure that it is used only as a measure of last resort and to exclusively to prevent harm to the child or others, and monitor its implementation.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
I am aware of Mr Johnson's long-standing interest in this subject, and I know he will agree with me that when we meet next week.
Daniel Johnson.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for her very welcome remarks. Indeed, she'll be aware that I have a consultation open on a Members' Bill on this precise subject. Would she agree with me that not just the committee's comments, but also the fact that Northern Ireland is now consulting on this very issue changes the context? And what's more, does she agree with me that we need robust reporting standards and also training standards for teachers, rather than just simply guidance itself, to actually make progress in this area?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank Daniel Johnson for his supplementary question. I am, of course, aware about the consultation he's engaged in on the possibility of his Members' Bill on the use of restraint and seclusion in schools. I think he makes a very valid point in relation to the context changing and other parts of the UK looking at what more they might be able to do. I very much look forward to considering further details of his Members' Bill proposal. Of course, we'll be meeting Presiding Officer next week to discuss some of this detail. He's made mention of reporting and training standards, particularly in relation to teacher education. I'm keen to discuss both of these topics in a bit more detail with him when we meet next week.
Question number 6, Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its responded to a survey that found only 9% of businesses felt that the Scottish Government understood this landscape in Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary Neil Gray.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are grateful to the Fraser of Allender Institute, whom I met yesterday to discuss this and other areas around the Scottish economy, for carrying out this survey of 400 businesses. There is no doubt the results are disappointing. That's why the role of the New Deal for Business Group to build trust with business and to drive meaningful, tangible change is important. While the indicators from the survey could help track progress over time, a broader set of indicators should be developed to more fully measure progress and impact. These could include broader impact indicators such as business confidence and business investment, and this will be further considered by the New Deal for Business Group. The New Deal for Business Group is just part of a process to ensure we create the conditions collaboratively to support business, which in turn will drive fair, green economic growth and with a purpose, feeding into strong and sustainable finances to tackle poverty and support our public services and communities.
Alexander Stewart.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The business community have clearly delivered a vote of no confidence in the SNP's economic management. Therefore, will they tackle decisively action to ensure that every single minister in the Scottish Government is 100% committed to the key objective of economic growth?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yes, I thank Alexander Stewart for that answer. The work that I've been doing, the First Minister has been leading across government to ensure that we are responsive to business needs. But of course we have to recognise that not all the levers of the economy are in the control of the Scottish Government. And I know, and I'm sure colleagues in the Conservative Party must know, unless they've been hiding behind a bushel all summer, that the main drivers of concern for those in business in Scotland are areas around the impact of Brexit on labour supply, the impact of high interest rates on their tradable environment, and ensuring that they are able to meet economic growth. All of those areas need to see further action from the UK Government, which has wrecked the economy from that disastrous Truss quartine budget.
Question number 7, Paul O'Kane.
To ask the Scottish Government what its response is regarding levels of attainment in modern studies in the most recent SQA exam results in Renfrewshire.
Cabinet Secretary Jenny Gilruth.
As Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills and as a former modern studies teacher, I congratulate the ambition, hard work and resilience of the young people in Renfrewshire who achieved a strong set of results in modern studies. In 2023, pass rates for modern studies at National 5 in Renfrewshire were above the national average and the same as the national average at higher. The achievements of these young people should be celebrated.
Paul O'Kane.
I'm glad to hear that answer from the Cabinet Secretary, because she knows how important modern studies is in teaching good citizenship and respectful debate. Young people and their teachers across Renfrewshire work extremely hard to achieve their results in the subject. So what would the Cabinet Secretary say to a colleague encouraging the denigration of young people's exam results in order to attack a political opponent? And will she join me in condemning the actions of her colleagues from local SNP branches, council groups and even this chamber, who seem to believe that the life chances of pupils at Parkmains High, an excellent school in my region, are fair game in desperate political attacks?
Cabinet Secretary.
Clearly, Presiding Officer, I think we could all learn to be a little more circumspect and thoughtful in our use of social media, and in particular how and what adults say and do impacts on our children and young people. I understand the tweet the member has alluded to has since been deleted, and the member has apologised at the time, but I am intrigued by the care that Mr O'Kane appears to attach to one tweet from an SNP backbencher. The Scottish Labour Party has, of course, attached no such care to the 1,620 children in Rutherglen and Hamilton West who have been affected by the two-child benefit cap. It is the Tories' heinous rape clause which is harming children and their outcomes the length and breadth of this country. And instead of coming to the chamber today with a backbone, Mr O'Kane comes to bemoan a tweet on social media.
Marie McNeill.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Schools work hard to deliver a diverse academic and vocational journey for students. For example, Bearsden within my constituency achieved the Gold Ambassador Award for their work to equally promote academic and vocational career pathways. What is the Scottish Government doing to support schools in the delivery of these routes?
Cabinet Secretary.
I thank the member for her question. She raises a really important point. Of course, this year we've seen a record number of vocational and technical qualifications achieved this year, and that breadth of pathways is hugely important in relation to the qualifications on offer to our young people. She mentions Bearsden Academy in her own constituency. I'd be more than happy to visit the school along with the member to hear about some of the work that's been undertaken in that school.
Thank you. That concludes general questions. Before we move to First Minister's questions, I invite members to join me in Thank you. The next item of business is First Minister's questions, and at question number 1, I call Douglas Ross.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and can I remind the Chamber that my wife is a serving police officer with Police Scotland. Body-worn cameras are vital for police officer safety and to increase public trust. The SNP have left Police Scotland as the last force in the United Kingdom to roll out body-worn cameras. But yesterday, Police Scotland said they couldn't guarantee that body-worn cameras will be rolled out next year. Humza Yousaf didn't deliver them when he was Justice Secretary. As First Minister, will he let police officers down again?
First Minister.
Well, can I say, first and foremost, of course, that we have increased the budget for Police Scotland. I'm pleased that after last week, Douglas Ross seems to have accepted the point that the Scottish Government has increased the budget for Police Scotland by 6.3% by an additional £80 million. Let me quote directly from Deputy Chief Officer David Page and what he actually said around body-worn cameras. He said, and I quote, "Our current plans are that we will continue to roll out our national body-worn videos as outlined in previous plans. When I was Justice Secretary, of course, I ensured that we had the capital budget to ensure that that could begin. So I'm very pleased to say that the Scottish Government, the facts remain that the Scottish Government has not only increased the budget for Police Scotland, but much like Chief Officer David Page said yesterday, the plans are to roll out our national body-worn video cameras for our police officers, who of course are the ones who should be credited for the fact that we have seen the lowest crime rates in Scotland, one of the lowest crime rates in Scotland for almost 50 years.
Douglas Ross.
The evidence was very clear that next year they will not be fully rolled out. Humza Yousaf said in his programme for government last week that they were a priority, but Police Scotland now say they can't guarantee it because there is a £300 million black hole in the capital budget. The First Minister likes to quote from Police Scotland, so let me quote a submission that they put to this Parliament's Justice Committee for yesterday's session. "Our current capital allocation is among the lowest
in UK policing is among the lowest in UK policing. This is significantly short of the funding required to improve conditions and equipment for the well-being of officers and staff. So if this really is a priority for Hamza Yusuf, will he now treat it like one?
First Minister.
Let's deal with the facts, Presiding Officer. The fact is the UK Government has cut our capital budget by over 6.5%. But here's some more facts for Douglas Ross. The Scottish Government has increased Police Scotland's budget by £80 million this year. Fact. Fact of the matter is we have more police officers per head in Scotland than England. Fact. Of course, when we look at recorded crime levels, they are at one of their lowest in Scotland in almost 50 years. Fact. In fact, recorded crime has fallen by 42% since the SNP came into power. That is a fact. So when it comes to looking at whether or not Scotland is safer under the SNP, there is simply no denying that Scotland is undoubtedly safer under this SNP government. That is a fact.
Douglas Ross.
Presiding Officer, budgets are so stretched that the police say that officer redundancies are now on the table. And let's look at facts that the First Minister wants to reiterate. £300 million black hole in Police Scotland's capital budget. Fact. Officer numbers in Scotland at their lowest levels in 14 years. Fact. First Minister, they started to slip when he was Justice Secretary, and now they're in free.
Higher for police officers in all ranks. Scotland compared to their counterparts in England and Wales. And look, when it comes to the budget, of course, we will negotiate, we will engage with all political parties right across.
The servant hasn't put this stat in his briefing pack, or he is not reading it. Police officer numbers in Scotland under the SNP are now at the lowest level in 14 years. That is a fact, First Minister, and that's what we are facing on the streets of Scotland right now. Police Scotland will be the last force in the UK to roll out body-worn cameras. Officers no longer have the resources to investigate every crime. Their workplaces are not fit for purpose, and now the number of officers could be cut by 2,000. The thin blue line is barely visible at this rate. So does the First Minister accept this, that with falling officer numbers, communities in Scotland will feel less safe?
First Minister.
I don't accept that in the slightest. Around 1,280 new recruits have joined Police Scotland in the last 18 months. Over 350 more police officers than when we took office in 2007. When it comes to real terms increases in Police Scotland's budget, that's a fair enough call for any political party to make. And of course we'll give that consideration when it comes to the budget. But has Douglas Ross ever asked himself why a real terms increase was difficult this year? Of course it was difficult, because inflation is sky high. Inflation is sky high because of his party's complete economic mismanagement of the public finances. So when it comes to real terms increases, of course we will give that consideration. But it was Douglas Ross a year ago that stood here that demanded the Scottish Government copy Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget. If we had done that, we wouldn't have money to spend on our police service or indeed any of our public services. Thank goodness that Douglas Ross is nowhere near the public finances of Scotland, Presiding Officer.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, last year the then Health Secretary promised no one would be waiting more than 18 months for an NHS procedure by September 2023. But the most recent figures show there are still 17,200 people on an NHS waiting list who have already waited over 18 months for hospital procedures. Yet another broken promise from a Health Secretary that has failed upwards. The result? People turning to private care. Figures out this week show 40% of all knee and hip replacements being carried out in Scotland are being self-funded by patients. 40%. Why does Humza Yousaf think it's acceptable that almost 5,000 patients last year were forced to cover the costs of their hip or knee replacements because of his failures?
First Minister.
First of all, Anna Sauer, of course, has every right to ask around the waiting times that our NHS are experiencing. But what I would say to Anna Sauer is every time he asks the question, he fails to mention, of course, the biggest shock our NHS has ever faced in its 75-year existence. And health services right across the UK, including in Scotland, are, of course, ensuring that we recover. When it comes to the longest waits, again, just to inject some facts into this exchange. When we look at the 2-year waits, the number waiting over 2 years for a new outpatient appointment is down 59% in Scotland. When we look at the 18-month wait, it's reduced by 40.6%. We look at those waiting over a year, 34% of specialities had fewer than 10 patients waiting over 52 weeks. So there is progress, there is recovery, and of course that recovery is going to take time. And what of course helps with that recovery is making sure that we have NHS staffing at near record levels, as they are under this government, but also making sure that we don't lose a single day of the NHS to industrial action. I'm pleased that this Scottish Government has ensured that our NHS staff remain the best paid in the entire UK.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, surely the First Minister knew about COVID when he made the promise last year that we eradicated by this time this year. The First Minister may not like it, but this is happening on his watch. In the last financial year alone, there were 43,000 patients treated privately in Scotland, an 8% increase in 1 year. 4,739 hip and knee replacements paid for privately. 7,805 cataract surgeries paid for privately. 1,988 colonoscopies. 2,055 endoscopies. 995 hernia repairs. And most shockingly of all, 1,745 rounds of chemotherapy paid for privately by patients. Healthcare free at the point of need, a founding principle of our NHS. How can the SNP have let it get so bad that patients are having to find the cash to pay for life-saving cancer treatment?
First Minister.
Of course, Presiding Officer, we don't want people to have to fund care out of their own pockets. We know, of course, the impact that the pandemic has had on our health service and indeed on those waiting lists. But I go back to the point to Anna Sauer that this is something that is being seen right across health systems across the globe, let alone across the UK. So when we look at those happening here in Scotland as well as across the UK, when I look at the figures from the Private Health Information Network over the first quarter of 2023, of course it shows worrying trends in relation to those who are accessing private healthcare, but it does also show that Scotland has a lower rate of take-up of private healthcare compared to England and Wales. The rate of people who are self-funding for private inpatient daycare is 16% higher in England, and in Wales it's 51% higher, where the Labour Party are in charge. And of course that will be cold comfort for people that have to dig deep into their own pockets to pay for healthcare. But what I would say is it's not unique here to Scotland. So what we'll do is continue to see that recovery, continue to reduce waiting lists, and what we will continue to do is make sure that our NHS staff are the best paid in the UK, so they continue to provide the excellent service that they do to patients up and down Scotland.
Anna Sarwar.
The number of people going private each year is going up, and those answers from the First Minister are going to be no comfort to the 43,000 patients who are being forced to pay privately. One person I spoke to in Cambuslang just a few weeks ago, £15,000 for a hip replacement because he had to wait 3 years. Completely and utterly unacceptable. In the middle of a cost of living crisis, where people are struggling to pay the bills, they shouldn't also have to worry about the cost of getting sick. But on the SNP's watch, 43,000 Scots are being forced to find £15,000 for a hip or knee replacement, £3,000 for cataract surgery, £3,000 for a colonoscopy, £4,000 for a hernia repair, and even cancer patients forced to find thousands of pounds for their chemotherapy. Patients in pain and heartbroken families trying to scrape together the cash, some even being forced to remortgage their homes to pay for the care they should be getting on the NHS. First Minister, why are more and more Scots being forced to pay the price for SNP incompetence and failure?
First Minister.
What we're seeing, of course, is the impacts of that global pandemic, which has impacted every single health service, including, of course, the health service here in Scotland. But if you want evidence, if Anna Sarwar, forgive me, wants evidence of the recovery, we are seeing more and more activity within the NHS. When I look at the activity in relation to inpatient daycare, the activity for Q2 was at its highest since the start of the pandemic. That's not the first, not the second, but actually the sixth quarterly increase in a row, with 58,813 patients seen in Q2. So we're seeing more and more patients, inpatients in this case, and daycare patients being seen. I'm pleased that Anna Sarwar mentioned the cost of living crisis, because we are taking action to tackle that cost of living crisis. Because of the action we are taking, of course, it's estimated that 90,000 fewer children will be in absolute or relative poverty, in stark contrast to the position of Anna Sarwar of a summer of U-turns, where he has aligned himself with cruel Tory policy after cruel Tory policy. Now, we are unashamedly anti-poverty, unashamedly pro-growth. The only thing Anna Sarwar is unashamedly pro-Starmer, presiding officer.
Question number 3, Ross Greer.
Thank you. To ask the First Minister what action the Scottish Government is taking in response to the first UN Global Stocktake report on the Paris Climate Agreement.
First Minister.
Well, there's simply no denying that the conclusions of the Global Stocktake report, they're deeply concerning, and that all countries, including, of course, Scotland, must seek to do more. The report found that nothing less than radical decarbonisation and systemic transformation will do. Scotland will, of course, play her part. Internationally, we will continue to urge greater ambition, greater action towards a just transition to net zero through our core chairmanship of the Under 2 coalition. I will highlight this as a matter of urgency while at New York Climate Week, and we look forward, of course, to COP28 to make clear decisions on fossil fuels, renewable energy and climate finance must be progressed with urgency. At home, Scotland has made progress on our net zero journey, though we know more has to be done. We'll continue to work with communities, businesses and international partners towards a net zero future.
Ross Greer.
Thank you. As First Minister said, Scotland has a deserved international reputation as a leader on climate action, but our domestic record needs to match up to that reputation. With Scottish Green policies like removing peak time rail fares from a few weeks from now, we're taking action to reduce emissions. The First Minister said he's about to join other world leaders at Climate Week and then at COP. So what new actions is he bringing to the table to demonstrate Scotland's commitment to tackle this global emergency?
First Minister.
Well, Ross Greer is absolutely right. It's incumbent upon governments right across the world to ensure that they are bringing urgency, pace and indeed initiative to tackling the climate emergency. Scotland has already had a big impact on the global stage, particularly through our pioneering commitment to loss and damages, and I'm determined to keep building upon that. But in terms of new initiatives, that's where my programme for government committed to serious climate action, cheaper public transport through free bus travel, trialling the scrapping of peak rail fares on ScotRail, as Ross Greer has mentioned, investing almost £5 billion in the net zero energy economy, a new climate change adaptation programme, a heat and buildings bill and the natural environment bill. Much more on top of that we will continue to build upon as we develop our new climate plan, and it's why I'm looking forward to hosting all party leaders so that we can get some sort of consensus, I hope, on the urgency that's required to tackle the climate emergency.
Sarah Boyack.
Sir, given that the Scottish Government has consistently failed to live up to our climate target, which is bad news for the 38% of households living in fuel poverty whose energy bills have increased, what does he say to the millions of people across the world and here in Edinburgh who will be campaigning on the streets this weekend to demand a just transition, given his government has flip-flopped on oil and gas and failed to deliver?
Let's hear the member.
I think a degree... I'm just referring to the Net Zero Committee this week, and failed to deliver retrofitting of people's homes who are living in fuel poverty.
First Minister.
Can I say to Sarah Boyack that she would have more credibility on this issue if her party didn't U-turn on its support on low-emission zones, or indeed it didn't dump its £28 billion Green Prosperity Fund. And that is the very, very point here, Presiding Officer, that time and time again, this Scottish Government doesn't just talk the talk, we're prepared to walk the walk. We will bring forward serious action to tackle the climate emergency. But what would really help, Presiding Officer, is that those parties that demand we meet our targets don't then oppose every single measure we bring to this chamber. So if Sarah Boyack is serious and the Labour Party are serious about tackling the climate emergency, join with us, support us, bring forward ideas that will help us collectively to tackle the climate emergency. Don't simply just dump the policies that you had, and don't simply just oppose those policies that we bring forward, and support us, because collective action is needed to tackle the climate emergency.
Finlay Carson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Could the First Minister update the Chamber on when we should expect to see the published update to the climate change plan?
First Minister.
At the end of this year, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And we move to question 4, and I call Jackie Dunbar.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister, in light of reports that no bids were received for offshore wind projects in the UK Government's latest Contract for Difference round, what action the Scottish Government is taking to encourage investment in offshore wind and hydrogen power in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, Jackie Dunbar absolutely exposes the UK Government's complete failure to capture one of the greatest opportunities for Scotland's net zero economy. Their inexplicable stance is both anti-climate, but it's also anti-growth. Industry has sent the UK Government a clear signal that the strike price must increase, and we back those calls 100%. To ensure we seize this opportunity, the Scottish Government supports the strategic investment model with public and private sector partners, specifically aimed at enabling a move from project-led to sector-level investment. Launching later this year will be the next tranche of hydrogen funding, the Green Hydrogen Fund. This flagship fund will focus on supporting renewable hydrogen production from Scotland's abundant renewable energy resources, seeking to give us first mover advantage. But I do hope, on the back of industry calls, that the UK Government will listen to the industry, and of course, hopefully, we'll have a successful future round.
Jackie Dunbar.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. A new report from Aberdeen's Robert Gordon University, published just this week, further reinforced that we cannot afford to get this wrong, and we must see investment in renewable technologies gather pace. The SNP Scottish Government has shown its ambition by committing £500 million to a Just Transition Fund, but this has to be matched by Westminster. Can the First Minister provide his response to this new report and any update on discussions with the UK Government to match the Scottish Government's Just Transition Fund?
First Minister.
Well, I do welcome the report from Robert Gordon University, and Jackie Dunbar is absolutely right. UK governments, successive UK governments, have taken billions and billions and billions from our North East and are not prepared to put a fraction back in. The very least the UK Government should do, the very least they should do, is match our £500 million Just Transition Fund, Presiding Officer. And what I would also say to the UK Government is that the latest round is an abject failure to capitalise on the vast potential, renewable potential that Scotland has. So what I would say to the UK Government is not just that does this harm our economy, but it's seriously harming our planet. Of a summer where we have seen the visual impacts, the disastrous visual impacts of the climate emergency, this is a time for climate leadership. What we're getting from the UK Government is, of course, complete political abdication.
Douglas Lumsden.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The fact that there were no bids received should be a wake-up call to this government. Offshore wind should be part of an energy mix. Instead, they are putting all their eggs into one basket, a basket that is considerably more expensive than the Scottish Government had
Let's hear the member.
So will the First Minister look again at having a more balanced energy mix that includes nuclear energy?
First Minister.
The member rightly looks embarrassed, as he should be, Presiding Officer. The Scottish Government is somehow responsible for the failure of the Contract for Difference auction that the UK Government controls, Presiding Officer. It is seriously desperate from the member. If he doesn't want to listen to me, Presiding Officer, he should listen to the likes of Keith Anderson, who said, and I'll quote directly, "This is a multi-billion-pound lost opportunity to deliver low-cost energy for consumers and a wake-up call for the UK government." Let's listen to Dan McNeill of Renewable UK, the CEO of Renewable UK, who says these results, the contract for difference auction round, should set alarm bells ringing in the government, as the UK's energy security and net zero goals can only be met if we have offshore wind as the backbone of our future energy system. I agree with Dan McNeill. I agree with Keith Anderson. If Conservatives had any influence in this regard, they would make sure that the UK government listens to the industry as opposed to listen to those who back fossil fuels alone.
Beatrice Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Offshore wind is a sustainable source of energy and a key part of Scottish Government plans to reach net zero targets. But the Scottish Government's first round of leasing sold our natural environment short with a cap price per square kilometre. Will the Scottish Government ensure any future leasing rounds are not undersold in order to get the maximum amount possible to reinvest in public services?
First Minister.
Scotland, of course, is the first evolved leasing round for offshore wind development in Scottish waters, the first leasing round in Scotland in a decade, and of course will make a significant contribution in terms of our public finances. Not only, of course, the £750 million in revenues to the public purse, but the billions of pounds that it will create in terms of opportunity to the supply chain. But I'm more than happy to, and the Cabinet Secretary will be more than happy to speak to the member in relation to how what more we can do to improve future leasing rounds. But the point here is that the Scottish Government believes in the vast potential of our renewables industry and our renewables potential in the face of a UK government that has turned its back on Scotland's renewable potential. So I hope members like Beatrice Wishart and other members across political parties will join with the SNP-led Scottish Government to put pressure on the UK Government to do more to unlock the huge potential that Scotland has for renewables.
Question number 5, Miles Briggs.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to statistics reportedly showing that the number of complaints against Social Security Scotland has increased by 350% in 1 year.
First Minister.
Social Security Scotland has introduced 13 Scottish Government benefits, 7 of which are available only in Scotland, thanks to a total investment of £12 billion, supporting people who need assistance. In 2022-23, it received almost 370,000 applications, hundreds of thousands of phone calls and web chats too. Social security is a fundamental human right, which is why we've established a very radically different benefit system built on dignity, built on fairness, built on respect. Our system vigorously promotes benefit take-up to make sure as many people as possible get what they are entitled to, while mitigating, of course, the austerity impacts of UK Government policies within our fixed budgets. In 2022-23, there were a total of 1,790 complaints, so complaint numbers do remain low. In fact, in relation to total applications, it's less than 0.5%.
Miles Briggs.
Well, I'm sure the First Minister must agree, though, that the situation isn't acceptable. MSPs from across Parliament will be aware of increasing costs and complaints experienced by our constituents. SNP ministers have said all is well. However, we are seeing increased processing times, delays in benefit rollout, and the possibility of the full devolution of all benefits not happening until 2026. So, therefore, can I ask the First Minister, when does he expect all benefits to be devolved to Social Security Scotland?
First Minister.
I'm more than happy for the Cabinet Secretary to write in detail to Miles Briggs, not just around the question that he asked specifically, but also on the significant improvements that we are making in relation to application processing times. Social Security Scotland is a success story. It's because of Social Security Scotland, because of the actions that we have taken in relation to social security and indeed progressive taxation, that it's estimated that 90,000 children will be lifted out of absolute and relative poverty this year. It's the reasons why, of course, poverty levels in Scotland are still too high, but we've seen rises, higher rises. We've seen rises in poverty across the UK, where the situation in Scotland has stabilised. We want to, of course, make sure poverty reduces. And the final thing I would say to Miles Briggs, and we will furnish him with further detail, so when it comes to the satisfaction levels of those who interact with Social Security Scotland, 81%, over 8 out of 10 respondents agreed that it was easy to contact Social Security Scotland, and 94%, over 9 out of 10 respondents agreed that Social Security staff treated them with kindness. That, I suspect, is a stark difference to the DWP.
I call Colette Stevenson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the First Minister confirm that user survey results demonstrate Scotland's social security system is adhering to the founding principles of dignity, fairness and respect, so that people are benefiting from the powers over social security being in the hands of this Parliament?
First Minister.
Yes, Colette Stevenson is absolutely right. That the survey shows just that. And in fact, again, when I look at satisfaction levels, almost 9 out of 10, 89% of respondents said that Social Security staff were able to help them. 89% of respondents said Social Security staff are knowledgeable about benefits. And as I've already said, through the actions this government has taken, through the hard work of the excellent team at Social Security Scotland, we have seen significant results when it comes to tackling poverty and child poverty in particular. And that wouldn't have been possible if it's not for the hard work of the excellent staff at Social Security Scotland and, of course, the ethos that we've had from the very beginning around dignity, around fairness and around respect.
Question number 6, Pauline McNeill.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government is doing to tackle repeat offending in the light of a recent report that found that people who experience frequent and serious repeat violence often do not bring this to the attention of the authorities.
First Minister.
The Scottish Government commissioned the report that the member refers to precisely because we knew that victims of repeat violence do not report their experiences, and it's of course important for us to understand the reasons and rationale behind why and how we can help them to access that support. While there are fewer crimes and fewer victims than over a decade ago, the impact on victims, particularly of sexual and violent crimes, can of course be absolutely devastating. That's why we're investing in law enforcement, crime prevention and reducing offending and reoffending through a range of activity, including our violence prevention framework. We're also putting victims of crime at the heart of our justice system through our Victims, Witnesses and Justice Reform Bill, and we've invested £93 million over the past 5 years to support victims.
Pauline McNeill.
I do welcome this report by the Scottish Government, which seeks to understand, or better understand, repeat violent victimisation. But it found that of those men experiencing repeat physical violence in Scotland, they live in deprived areas, have experienced homelessness or are living in supported accommodation and in recovery from addiction. Whereas intimate partner abuse was the highest amongst women aged 16 to 24, also living in deprived areas. But the report talks about local communities led by mentors, peer mentors and those with lived experience were uniquely positioned to support people experiencing repeat violence. So is First Minister a slightly different perspective on crime? So I ask the First Minister, with that in mind, what can be done to support the grassroots organisations, which the research found is quite limited by insecure funding?
First Minister.
I think Pauline McNeill makes some very important points indeed, and the points that she makes is exactly why we will continue to support programmes such as Medics Against Violence and of course, the delivery of the excellent Navigator programme. It's why we've invested and continue to invest in the Violence Reduction Unit, which has been hailed as a great exemplar globally. And in terms of supporting grassroots organisations, I couldn't agree more with Pauline McNeill. I think the investment in those third sector partners is absolutely crucial, and that's why more than 20 organisations have received awards from our victim-centred approach fund, including Victim Support Scotland, who were awarded over £18 million to support families bereaved by crime service. So we'll continue to invest in those grassroots interventions. What I would say to Pauline McNeill is, of course, the Justice Secretary will be more than happy to continue the conversation with Pauline McNeill. We've received that report. It's really important that we act upon what that excellent report is telling us.
Thank you. We move to general and constituency supplementaries, and I call Clare Adamson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Does the First Minister share my dismay that Motherwell Concert Hall and Theatre was closed with immediate effect until further notice due to the discovery of rack concrete in the roof of the building? Of course, safety is absolutely paramount. Motherwell Civic Theatre and Concert Hall is a beloved venue both by professional and amateur performers, not least the cast of the acclaimed Christmas panto. Can I ask the First Minister if the Scottish Government will engage with the local authority on the challenges facing the future of this important local cultural venue?
First Minister.
Yes, we will continue to engage with local authorities, as we have done throughout the course of the last not just few weeks, but few months. And I'm more than happy for the Cabinet Secretary to speak. Of course, we'll speak directly to Clare Adamson. Clare Adamson is right. These are difficult issues. It's really important that local authorities and that others continue to align themselves with the Institute of Structural Engineers guidance. That is what partners are seeking to do, and of course that empowers them to take the appropriate mitigations, and that can include at times unfortunately having to close down buildings where they feel that is necessary. But I'm more than happy to ensure that the Cabinet Secretary writes to Clare Adamson. I'm sure she'd be happy to engage with Clare Adamson too on this very important issue.
Sue Webber.
First Minister, childcare formed the cornerstone of your programme for government. It is also central for child development and allowing parents and carers to get back to work. Yesterday, out of the blue, Curry primary school families lost their before and after school clubs. Parents have contacted me desperate for help, with one unsure how they can balance childcare and their job as a teacher in Dalkeith. First Minister, will you meet with me to discuss solutions to this very pressing local issue?
First Minister.
I'd be more than happy for Sue Webber to furnish the Government with the full details. Obviously, she's given a synopsis of the situation, and of course the Cabinet Secretary would be more than happy to meet with Sue Webber. Sue Webber is right. Childcare was a cornerstone, not just of my programme for government, but has been a cornerstone of this government since 2007. And we now have, of course, a very generous childcare offer, one that I'm very keen to build upon, and that's why also the staff who do a phenomenal job in terms of providing that childcare, I will ensure that they are paid, that the funds are available to pay them £12 an hour within the PVI sector. But if Sue Webber can furnish the Government with full details, then I'll ensure that the Cabinet Secretary engages with her on this issue.
Pam Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, disabled people in Glasgow have written to all MSPs in the region, including the First Minister, to say that, and I quote, "Despite our large numbers, disabled people have never been a priority for the Scottish Government. The Glasgow Centre for Population Health has described the situation as a human catastrophe, and the CEO of Glasgow Disability Alliance has said that the result is that disabled people are dying of poverty. Nobody knows and nobody cares." So can I ask the First Minister, does he know that it's this bad for disabled people in the city he represents? And does he care enough to commit to taking action to address it, including to end non-residential care charges?
First Minister.
I do understand, of course, because I met with the Glasgow Disability Alliance just a matter of weeks ago. I heard from the members of the board of the Glasgow Disability Alliance in Tresor Burke, who very powerfully over the years has articulated the concerns for disabled people living in Scotland. That's why my programme for government, of course, committed to reopen the Independent Living Fund, which was an ask from disabled people's organisations. And of course, that's why we'll continue to work with them to see what more we can do, including, of course, the ending of non-residential care charges, which we are still committed to do by the end of this parliamentary term. But I would say to Pam Duncan-Glancy, that will come at a significant cost. So it's really important that when Labour do engage with us, they do not turn their back on progressive taxation, as Anna Sawar seems to have done, and to turn their backs on any ability for us to raise any revenue, because all of these initiatives, well-intentioned, can make a difference, will cost money, and it's so important that we engage in a credible discussion around how we raise that revenue.
Alistair Allen.
The Linda Norgrove Foundation in my constituency has been desperately trying to get 20 female medical students out of Taliban-ruled Afghanistan and into medical schools in Scotland. However, they are being stymied by UK visa issues. I know that the Foundation were extremely appreciative of the Cabinet Secretary's help when they met with her last month. Is there anything further the Scottish Government can do to help these inspirational women?
First Minister.
Well, I hope all of us as a Parliament can unite to back this particular cause. I want to pay tribute to the excellent work that Linda Norgrove Foundation does. I think it's incumbent on all of us to put pressure on the UK Government, on the Home Office, to help, given we all know the plight, how difficult the plight is for women in Afghanistan. So Jenny Goldruth, I know the Cabinet Secretary, has engaged with the Foundation. We've also, my understanding, is engaged and written to the UK Government and the Home Office on this particular matter. I will see if there's anything more that we can possibly do on this issue, but I would hope that we can collectively join as a Parliament to say to the UK Government that their response, their foot dragging on this particular issue, I'm afraid, is simply not good enough and is letting down women and girls in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Graham Simpson.
Thank you. The cost of building the Glen Sannox and Glen Rosa is an ongoing scandal. We don't know when they'll be finished, we don't know what the final bill will be, and we don't know what's happened to all the money. The Auditor General says he needs extra powers in order to find out what's happened to £128 million of money that was spent by FML. Will the First Minister grant those powers?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, there has been a number of inquiries to which, of course, the Scottish Government and indeed those at Ferguson's have cooperated fully. Hundreds of documents that have been published and put into the public domain around what is happening at Ferguson's. I will not hesitate in apologising to our island communities for the fact that they are still waiting for the completion of both 801 and 802. What I won't do, Presiding Officer, is apologise for the fact that the Scottish Government did step in and made sure that we secured and saved hundreds of jobs in Inverclyde.
Faisal Chowdhury.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Police Scotland recently released a report highlights that this year funding allocation represents a real reduction. As a result, the number of police officers have been reduced to 16,600 in Scotland. At the same time, the number of calls being made to Police Scotland are reportedly only increasing. Can the First Minister advise what action the Scottish Government are taking to ensure that Police Scotland are suitably funded to deal with this demand?
First Minister.
To the member that we are funding Police Scotland suitably because, of course, they have received an increase of 6.3%, an £80 million increase to their budget. Not only have they had an increase to their budget, of course, recorded crime is at one of its lowest levels in almost 50 years. When we look at police officer pay, they are, of course, the best paid police officers in the UK. So we are making sure that Police Scotland is appropriately funded. If Faisal Chowdhury thinks that there should be an increase to the budget, what he cannot do, what his party cannot do, is turn their back on progressive taxation or indeed any way in which we can raise revenue to ensure that our public services are appropriately funded.
Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the Aquafil factory in Kilburnie, which carries out interlacing and twisting for the carpet yarn industry, has been unexpectedly earmarked for closure as early as next month, with the loss of up to 40 jobs. This will be a devastating blow to the workers and wider community. Aquafil blamed, and I quote, COVID and Brexit for the challenging conditions in the UK and a doubling of energy costs. I'll meet with the company on site tomorrow. What steps can the Scottish Government take to assist the company, the workforce and lessen the impact of any proposed redundancies?
First Minister.
Well, Neil Gray will be happy to meet with the member around Aquafil. We'll see what can be done where necessary to hopefully prevent job losses or where that unfortunately becomes a material reality, where we can help those into alternative employment. And it's interesting that Kenny Gibson says 3 factors that have contributed: COVID, Brexit and indeed high energy costs. Of course, COVID affecting business right across the globe, but the other 2 factors very unique to the UK Government. So very unique to the UK and self-inflicted damage that Brexit has done.
Let's hear the First Minister.
The utter mismanagement of the UK public finances is why, of course, we're seeing high energy and high inflation costs, which are damaging businesses right across Scotland.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. During FMQs on the 22nd of June, I raised a point of order that the First Minister had misled the Chamber. On the 29th of August, the First Minister wrote, telling me what he had intended to say. But what he has stated to me in writing is not true. A Freedom of Information request reveals that weeks of civil service time and effort was spent trying to engineer a face-saving response, rather than the First Minister simply admitting he had misled us all. Does the First Minister share people's concerns that the Scottish civil service appears to be increasingly politicised, which could destroy public trust? And what will he do
to
prevent such partisan protection from ministers who intentionally mislead in the future?
First Minister.
It's incredible, Presiding Officer, that I have a member who is telling me what I was actually meaning to say and meaning to think. I mean, it is incredible that we have Liam Kerr talking about disrespecting Parliament. I'm meant to take a lecture from the Conservatives about disrespecting
First
Parliament.
Minister, sorry, let's treat one another with courtesy and respect.
Well, don't worry, I'll get to them about courtesy and respect, Presiding Officer, because I'm meant to take a lecture about disrespecting Parliament from the Conservatives who illegally shut down the Parliament. I'm meant to take lectures. I'm meant to take lectures about truth and honesty from the party that gave us Boris Johnson, Presiding Officer. The very difference between myself and Liam Kerr, between the SNP and the Conservatives, is that the SNP wants to power our just transition, wants to power our offshore renewable sector. The Tories, I'm afraid, just want to hold us back, Presiding Officer.
Audrey Nicholl. I call Audrey Nicholl.
Apologies, Presiding Officer. This morning, new data shows the vast majority of Scots view immigration as a positive benefit that enriches Scotland culturally and economically. Can the First Minister update the Chamber on his interactions with the UK Government on labour shortages in key sectors as a result of the UK's archaic immigration policies?
First Minister.
Audrey Nicholl articulates very well the positive benefits of migration. In fact, virtually every single study under the sun shows that migrants who have come to the UK have contributed more than they have taken. And I have to say, the absolute hostile environment that has been created by successive UK governments is woeful. The UK has become a pathetically insular country. And not only is it morally wrong, but it undoubtedly cuts our nose despite our face in terms of the economic potential that migrants could bring to Scotland and indeed to the rest of the UK. So I would urge political parties. I frankly have lost hope with the UK government, with the Conservative UK government when it comes to migration. I would plead with Anna Sauer to use any influence he has when it comes to Keir Starmer and the UK Labour Party, who seem to be engaged in a race to the bottom when it comes to the issue of migration. That's not going to help the UK, certainly isn't going to help Scotland at all.
And Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. It's been a persistent issue over many years with the short running of trains serving the Fife to Edinburgh service, well used by my constituents. I raised this previously with ScotRail and with the previous Transport Minister and was assured that this would be resolved, but it continues. And today, for example, the 0811 service from Inverclyde, a very busy service, had just 2 carriages, leaving passengers stranded on the platform, having to wait 20 minutes for the next service, meaning they would be late arriving at their place of work. Now, it's very welcome we're seeing a reduction in peak time fares, but that's no use to people if they can't get on the train in the first place. So when is this finally going to be brought to an end?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, we have invested significantly in the rolling stock in Scotland in the time that we have been in office, and I know that the previous Transport Minister held a meeting with Fife MSPs in relation to the issues that Murdo Fraser mentions, I think earlier in the year, in springtime. But I'm more than happy for the Cabinet Secretary to write to Murdo Fraser and, where appropriate, meet with Fife MSPs so we can ensure that the people of Fife get the service that they absolutely need and require.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Gillian Mackay, and there will be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and public gallery to do so.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please, subscribe to and share our channel, or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.